Well, how about this? Matt Sakaris alongside Blake Price and Rinkwide's Jeff Patterson, a special emergency edition here of Sakaris and Price today after the Vancouver Canucks swing a second trade this week at Calgary, acquiring Calgary Flames defenseman Nikita Zadorov for a 2024 fifth-round pick, the pick they just received from the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for Anthony Beauvillier, and a 2026 third-round pick, a draft that is still 3 drafts away, guys. That's a 15-year-old that they have just traded on top of next year's fifth rounder for Nikita Zadorov. Blake, start with you. Your thoughts on the trade?
Well, yeah, kicking the can down the road on that draft pick for sure, and getting Zadorov at a price I didn't think they could get him at. To be quite honest, I thought that Calgary, particularly with Vancouver as a trade partner, would do everything to be an obstacle to this acquisition, and it doesn't appear that that's the case. They get a player that is defensively sound. He's mammoth, which adds to now a growing Canucks defense core, and allows you to put together, especially when healthy, 3 decent pairings, guys. Albeit not necessarily lefty righty. Although, again, this is a right side defenseman, almost through and through, in Nikita Zadorov, albeit with a left-handed shot. So, to me, it's a total thumbs up. I don't have any problem with the cost of acquisition, given they just got this pick from Beauvillier, and the additional third round way down the road. So to me, it's a win-win and still leaves some space open, Jeff, that if they want to make a move down the road, and we're already seeing reports that Ethan Bear is still on the menu for them.
Yeah, and apparently the first look at the defending Stanley Cup champs, that wasn't enough for this day for the Vancouver Canucks. It's now overshadowing their game against the Vegas Golden Knights. But yeah, second straight game day that there's been a trade to digest and ultimately deconstruct. And yeah, I mean, the first thing is the size. And like, the name's been out there for a while. The acquisition cost, I think, is pretty attractive. And to have stood there and talked to Patrick Alvin out at UBC on Wednesday, and we asked what was he going to do with that salary cap flexibility that he had finally carved out for himself. And it didn't last even 24 hours. And they go and they get a guy that they think can help them on the back end. And I think he can as well. You've already got Tyler Myers at 6'7", 6'8". Now you get a 6'6" guy in there. Carson Soucy, when he's healthy, is all of 6'5". And Ian Cole's not the tallest guy, but stout and stocky. And we know that Philip Hronek doesn't shy away from physicality as well. So look, since Rick Tocchet took over, he has ogled from afar that Vegas defense that ultimately led the Golden Knights to the championship, and it seems like the Vancouver Canucks are trying to, create their own version here in Vancouver, and I would say Zadorov is a big part of that.
Yeah, ironic it happens on the day when they're playing Vegas for first place at Rogers Arena that Rick Tocchet gets his big Vegas-style defenseman. Echo everything the two of you said. I mean, look, if this was Anthony Beauvillier in a fourth-round pick, I think everyone would be quite happy with that. It's an easy way to look at the acquisition cost. I was listening to our friend Ryan Pinder on Afterburner in Calgary, and their immediate reaction to this trade, and there's disappointment there in Calgary. They wanted a second-round pick for this player, particularly given what they acquired him for, which I believe was the third from the Chicago Blackhawks, particularly given how early it is in the season, gentlemen. I mean, Calgary's won some hockey games here. They're back in the playoff mix in what is a weak Western Conference. So there's got to be a psychological blow there to the Flames that Craig Conroy is already breaking this team up a little bit. Look, we knew the Vancouver Canucks needed a defenseman in the here and now with Carson Soucy ailing. In fact, they need defensemen going forward as well. And guys, if he can hold down that right side, there's the chance here that this guy solves the biggest organizational hole out there, a top 4 right side defenseman. So there is plenty to like about this trade. He affects 3/4 of the season, not just 1/4 of the season after the trade deadline. He's got all this time to integrate with his new teammates. And look, management has a chance to evaluate him over a longer term, knowing you're going to play some very important games, and gives them more time to talk extension with Zadorov. So, boy, this has been a hell of a week for Patrick Alvin and Jim Rutherford executing these two trades, because I think we were all surprised they were able to get rid of Beauvillier in its entirety and get a draft pick back in this cash-strapped world. And true to the organization's MO, get cap space, spend cap space. They've done good work with the second part of this deal that we all knew was coming after they cleared the space with Beauvillier.
He's mobile enough too, guys. He's clearly got a decent enough shot with 14 goals last year, and people might be saying, oh, yeah, but he's not going to get the power play time on this team. None of those goals were on the power play, and I don't suspect he's going to be able to come close to that because he's only got one goal this season. But the greater point is that he's not inept at chipping in offensively as well. Jeff, I'm putting you on the spot here, and we haven't put the spotlight on this guy before, but do you have any instant recall of him playing on the right side and his comfort level there? Because as far back as I can see, he's been playing on the right side, which is good because Soucy and Cole have both done it, but not in the super recent past. This is a guy who's got it now in his back pocket recently.
Yeah, I can't break down how much time he spent on the right as opposed to the left, but to the guys that you just mentioned there, it gives Rick Tocchet and Adam Foote and the coaching staff options now. And really these first 23 games, it's all been this committee and, trying different things. And through it all, they've got this record of 15-7-1. So, they have yet to really hit on solidified pairs. I know that they like Carson Soucy and Tyler Myers and the way they had played in the games leading up to Soucy's injury. So I would think, again, when you come out of this, and there's no guarantee that the guys you've got now are going to be healthy when Carson Soucy gets back, and that's believed to be just after Christmas. But I would keep Myers and Soucy as a third pair, and then you would look at Cole and Zadorov. Although, again, it gives them some flexibility that, I see there are reports that, they're not out on Ethan Bear, that this doesn't close the door on chasing Ethan Bear. At some, imagine if you went Quinn Hughes and Ethan Bear, you could drop Philip Hronek down, but you could still pair Hronek and Hughes together if you were trailing, you were trying to supercharge a little bit of offense. So again, I just think, a 28-year-old who turned 28 in the spring. So, this is very much his 28. It's not like he's going to turn 29 in January. He'll be 28 for all of this season. And of course, he's a Dan Milstein client. So you do have to wonder if there is an extension to come, if there's another shoe to drop, or if there will be some evaluation period here. The other thing too, guys, and I think you have to give Patrick Allvin and the front office credit. At a time where all we ever hear is, oh, there's no trades being made in the National Hockey League. Since the eve of training camp, when they flipped Tanner Pearson and a pick for Casey DeSmith, they've brought in Sam Lafferty, they've brought in Mark Friedman, they traded out Anthony Beauvillier, and now they land essentially one of the guys that was going to be pretty high on everybody's trade bait board when we got around to those trade bait boards. But to your point, Matt, about getting it done early, this speaks to sort of Jim Rutherford's MO. Whenever he's been in charge, he likes to get ahead of the crowd, doesn't like to pay deadline prices, and at times likes to set the market instead. And so he's done that in the past, and maybe there was some Jim Rutherford influence here, but it is Patrick Allvin is the guy with his hand on the wheel, and he's done pretty nice work getting all of these deals done, minor in nature for the most part, but all gains at the fringes for the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, and I think this is the biggest one of the lot yet, Jeff, in terms of in season. Blake, we talked about it on Thursday's Carson Price. Rutherford's playbook is absolutely you move early. We saw that last year with the Bo Horvat trade, and the Philip Hronek trade, which came out of nowhere. So this is another sort of big move here from this organization, and it's smart to move early. Jeff talks about deadline prices. Even if the price goes down because you're only getting a quarter of the season versus 3/4 of the season, I'd rather pay a little more here to let him affect the totality of games that he's going to be able to affect with the Canucks. Not to mention, as I pointed out earlier, the integration. Blake, as you've been talking about for a while here, there is a little bit of a mini window here in a weak Western Conference where you've got a couple of good teams in your division that you're going to be vying with for home ice, the Vegas Golden Knights and the Los Angeles Kings. Probably a couple of good teams in Colorado and Dallas across the way in the Central. But from that point forward, there's a real opportunity to make a run here and get the market excited for the first time with home playoff games and home playoff wins at Rogers Arena. Here's a player with playoff size, maybe a different profile of a guy than what you've got. I know you got a big defenseman in Myers, but this guy's got a little bit of snarl. And, lest we forget, guys, when we talk about the extension possibilities here, and it had been reported all season long that this was a player that was going to interest the Canucks when it comes to free agency next year. You've got Tyler Myers and Ian Cole as UFAs at the end of this year. So being able to talk extension with Nikita Zadorov can help you going forward on top of the help that he's going to provide here over this this next 50 some games.
And you're right, because there's a pedigree of player I think that you could have gone out and find. I mean, people were dreaming of Dante Fabro not too long ago, that sort of thing. But all due respect to Dante Fabro, I think that Zadorov speaks to a more playoff kind of caliber of defenseman with his size. And yet again, he's not immobile at all with his size. This does speak to the Canucks looking at the playoffs as much as they are looking at improving in the now, and it didn't cost them anymore. I don't think the Flames sold this as a playoff guy, so you're going to have to pay us more. I think they probably thought they had to get this guy out of the dressing room because he clearly was unhappy with the direction of the team. Although I don't know that he was necessarily a risk of being a cancer here in Vancouver because he's a UFA to be. He's gotten out of the place where he was. He's going to a winning team right now, and he's around a lot of his agent's clients. There's fellow Russians on this team, so I would suspect that Nikita Zadorov is a happy camper right now and probably should be until the end of his contract at the end of the season when he can choose to do whatever he wants, Jeff, whether that's stay here or move on to another pasture.
Well, he should be happy. I mean, he basically demanded out. He got that. He's coming to a team that is sitting pretty and has a chance to have more points than anybody else in the conference at night's end. A team that has put itself in a great spot right now to be there when the playoffs begin. And it's a team that has all this individual talent, and he's seen that up close in personal as a member of the Calgary Flames over the last couple of years. But the other thing, guys, and I always wonder, the hockey circle is pretty small. When you get traded and you walk into a new room, and yes, he's got countrymen there. He played with Tyler Myers way back when they were together in Buffalo. Played with Ian Cole when Cole made a stop in Colorado, and Pia Suter when he broke into the National Hockey League with Chicago. So, I mean, there are some familiar faces that should ease the transition in that regard. And you would hope that this guy can hit the ground running. He's not going to play against Vegas. So that just makes the storyline that much more delicious that his debut looks like it's going to come on Saturday at the Saddle Dome.
Look, in terms of being a Milstein client, you certainly don't make this deal because of that, but a happy byproduct is maybe you calm the waters with the agent and, of course, his client, Andre Kuzmenko on that. Jeff, what I would be interested in hearing from you is, do you think they had to have gone to Tocchet and Foote before making this trade and saying, look, guys, I know you don't like left-handers on the right side of defense, but this guy is available. It's going to be difficult to get a pure right shot in here, top four right shot. We have to give it our best and most earnest effort to play this guy on the right side and maybe even play him in the top four if we're going to make this trade.
A lot was made at training camp or ahead of training camp about the lefty-righty balance, but we've seen here recently where they've elected to go with 4 righties and 2 lefties when they've had a left shot option. And again, they've hit a little bit of a rough patch of late, but I mean, when you look at the record, they've been just fine with whoever they've run out there on defense. So I think that there is synergy from management down through the coaching staff. I think there's constant dialogue. I think Rick Tocchet's eyes would light up at the idea of adding a 6'6" redwood that he can plug in there on either side. So I'm sure the coaching staff is over the moon to add this sort of piece of the puzzle. And now it becomes a little bit of an experiment to find where exactly is the best fit for him. And I had somebody reach out to me on social and say, hey, what about down the road? If you move Tyler Myers for a draft pick, you sign Ethan Bear. And he said, if that happens, then he's going to chip in money for the statue for Patrick Elvine out front of Rogers Arena. But, again, this guy's ability to make trades, I don't think they're satisfied. And it is pro sports. You never know when opportunity knocks with the talent that they've assembled here, the start to their season. I do think that maybe they have allowed themselves to dare to dream what's possible. And the other part, guys, is for all this, we're talking up Vegas and Vancouver here. The way the LA Kings are going, this could be a first, this could be, after all these years of wanting the Canucks to get back to the playoffs, their first round opponent could be the defending Stanley Cup champs.
Right. And you could be in a hell of a effectively 2-3 matchup in the Pacific any way you slice it, Jeff. I mean, Blake has talked about a mini window, and you are to some degree, because of the great start, because you got these superstars in their absolute prime, because the contractual status of Elias Pettersson, Filip Hronek, and frankly, the OEL penalty, which gets a little more difficult to digest in years going forward. You are to a degree pot committed here, or at least a little more committed this year than you have been in previous years, given the circumstances and given the variables around it. And guys, I just found myself sitting here wondering, okay, what's the worst case scenario with this deal? He gets hurt, you lose a third and a fifth, or he just doesn't really fit in. And at worst case, he's a third pair defenseman for the rest of the year. Even that's not the worst outcome.
That's not the worst
You're
outcome.
be able to get over that. Blake, a final thought from you.
Well, again, thinking ahead to the playoffs, you think about teams at the trade deadline. They often make deals, even though you got 6 defensemen that have played all season. You see them make a trade for a defenseman, and all of a sudden, a guy who played every night for a team or played 76 times for a team, he's the 7th guy all of a sudden, and on the outside looking in, because you want that depth at the at playoff time. So I think it's still possible that this team adds to it and make sure, because let's face it, guys like Friedman and Juleson and others that have made appearances on this blue line, they aren't full-time National Hockey League players. The Canucks could very well have 7 full-time National Hockey League players on their roster here for the second half of the season, and that's an exciting thought for Canucks fans, I'm sure.
Jeff, final word?
Yeah, it's a good news day and a season that's been full of them for the Vancouver Canucks. And again, it just injects more enthusiasm into a marketplace that has responded to this team. And we felt that in the building. You see, I mean, I've always said nothing gets people to react viscerally like trades, like sizable trades. And you're seeing that again today. And Patrick Allvin is holding up his end of that bargain in terms of, getting people back on board with this hockey club. And again, the performance at the top end of the lineup has given people around the National Hockey League reason to pay attention to the Vancouver Canucks. So how about that? After what has really been a dark decade, dare I say the Canucks are one of the it teams in the first couple of months of the National Hockey League season.
Yeah. Jeff, we'll talk to you on Rink Wide after the Vegas game and tomorrow on Sekeres and Price. Blake, thanks for jumping in. Now here's a full edition of Sekeres and Price from Thursday.
This Sekeres and Price clip brought to you by Applewood Auto Group. And remember,
it's all good at Applewood.